On January 3rd, the U.S. military launched a late-night raid and abducted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, taking him to the United States. That same day, at the White House press briefing room, Trump stood in front of the microphones and stated bluntly why he did it: to help the United States obtain Venezuela's oil. His exact words were, "We will allow the largest American oil companies, the world's top oil giants, to enter Venezuela, invest tens of billions of dollars, and repair the country's severely damaged oil infrastructure. We are going to start generating revenue for our nation." I did not believe this explanation at all at the time. I firmly believed it was a lie, a surface-level excuse thrown out by Trump. The real purpose, I believed, had to be something much bigger politically, because everyone knows that Venezuela's oil is of very poor quality. It doesn't sell for much in a year. If it were free, maybe that would be fine. But starting a war to get it, that simply wouldn't be worth it. Otherwise, given Venezuela's location right at America's doorstep, if its oil were truly that valuable, Trump wouldn't even have had the chance. The Democrats would have taken it long ago. And when Trump said that just tens of billions of dollars would be enough to restore Venezuela's entire oil infrastructure, I found that extremely strange. That number was simply too small. Would a permanent member of the UN Security Council really go to war for a deal worth only tens of billions of dollars? Wouldn't that be embarrassingly cheap? But Trump insisted that with just tens of billions in investment, Venezuela's oil production could be fully revived. At the time, we could only take him at his word. At its peak, Venezuela produced 3.5 million barrels of oil per day. After years of US sanctions, that figure has collapsed to just 800,000 barrels per day. So by that logic, investing tens of billions would yield an additional 2.7 million barrels per day. As for sales, there would be no problem. The sanctions were imposed by the US so they could just as easily be lifted. Those 2.7 million barrels could practically be treated as pure profit. By that calculation, it really did look like an enormous win. So Trump immediately announced that the US would launch a second wave of military strikes against Venezuela, unless Venezuela handed over its oil resources outright. And Venezuela's newly installed interim government grasped with extreme weakness, not daring to reject Trump's demands, truly worthy of the title "the leader blessed by God for America." Such a profitable deal, sitting right next to the US. And so many previous presidents simply passed it up out of dignity. What a waste. Look at Trump, so effortlessly making the US all this money. But then the problem emerged. The US government doesn't drill oil. That job has to be done by American oil companies. So the White House sent letters to all the major US oil firms, telling them to get ready and come to the White House in a few days to bid. Whoever offered the best terms would get this massive prize. On January 7th, an evaluation report from Rystad Energy was released. It stated, Venezuela's oil infrastructure is damaged by 70%. Exploration and production alone will require $110 billion in investment, and 5 to 10 years to return to historical production levels. Soon after, reports from other oil companies followed. Their estimates were nearly identical. Investment costs around $100 billion, with payback periods of roughly 10 years. After seeing these reports, Trump panicked. On January 8th, Trump suddenly changed his tune, claiming that US actions against Venezuela might have been retaliation by Secretary of State Marco Rubio against Cuba. What did that mean? It was obvious Trump was starting to shift the blame. Rubio was being pushed forward to take responsibility for the leader. That same day, Trump also announced that he would meet on the 9th with executives from all major oil companies at the White House, and that these companies would invest at least $100 billion in Venezuela. On January 9th, America's oil tycoons gathered at the White House to discuss investing in Venezuelan oil production. At the meeting, ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods made it clear, under current conditions, there was no basis for investing in Venezuela's oil sector, unless Venezuela's business framework and legal system underwent major changes, and unless a long-term investment protection mechanism was established. To put it bluntly, he was basically saying, unless the US RMY controls Venezuela, they will not invest. ConocoPhillips CEO Ryan Lance said there were funding difficulties, and that bank financing would be required, preferably from Venezuelan banks, with Venezuelan oil facilities used as collateral. Chevron, currently the only US company still operating in Venezuela, also expressed a very cautious attitude toward expanding investment. Only a few small oil companies were willing to put up some money, but even combined, their offers were insignificant compared to the $100 billion figure. Even more absurd, among the representatives who were supposed to attend, 25 people didn't show up at all. They couldn't even be bothered to come and speak. To the companies that did attend, Trump promised absolute safety for their investments in Venezuela. As for the 25 who didn't show up, Trump exploded, "If you won't do it, someone else will." Before the meeting, Trump had Petro sign agreements on the spot on the 9th, immediately launching oil investments in Venezuela, with him personally deciding which companies would be allowed in. But once the meeting began, according to CCTV reports, most companies not only refused to sign anything, they wouldn't even make a clear investment commitment. As soon as the meeting ended, Trump announced the cancellation of the previously planned second wave of military strikes, saying it did not appear to be necessary. At the same time, for security reasons, all US naval vessels remained in place. Then Trump completely lost control. He began seizing Venezuelan oil tankers around the world, declaring that the oil would be transferred to the US as American revenue. He even went so far as to declare a national emergency, just to prove to voters that attacking Venezuela had produced returns. Finally, Trump announced again that US oil companies would still invest $100 billion in Venezuela, that Venezuelan oil would belong to the US, and that MAGA supporters should rest assured. But here's the problem: that's $100 billion. Venezuela has a population of only 28.4 million people. Is the US really going to invest $100 billion in a country like that? And it's not just any industry, it's heavy chemical industry. And it would take 10 years of oil production just to break even. What would $100 billion do to Venezuela? How many jobs would it create? How many raw material markets? How much growth in services? In real estate? If you don't grasp how massive this number is, let me put it into perspective. China has 1.4 billion people minus 50 times Venezuela's population. Scaled accordingly, that would be equivalent to the US investing $5 trillion in China's heavy chemical industry, about 35 trillion RMB. And with a 10-year payback period, no quick exit, no fast cash. This would be genuine, long-term investment and construction. Do you know what 35 trillion RMB in foreign investment into heavy industry means? China's entire economy will take off instantly. If the US really did that, Sino-Daeshula friendship would become eternal. I'm serious, anyone who said something bad about the US after that, I'd argue with them myself. Venezuela is even poorer than China. If the US truly invested $100 billion there, Venezuela would also take off overnight. So why arrest Maduro at all? If the US had simply put a $100 billion investment plan on the table, Maduro himself would have shown up at Trump's door with fruit baskets and milk, begging him to invest that money in Venezuela. For Maduro, for $100 billion, he could negotiate. He could even say he loves America. If Trump wanted to invest $100 billion in Venezuela, he should have just said so. If he had said it up front, would Maduro really have dared to oppose it? There would have been no need for US special forces. The Venezuelan people themselves would have removed Maduro and replaced him with someone willing to accept the investment. This wouldn't be investment anymore, it would be poverty alleviation. Was it really necessary to arrest Maduro first ever doing such a great charitable deed? Venezuela does have massive oil reserves, but the quality is notoriously bad, the worst in the world. Almost all heavy crude, completely different from the Middle East, where you stick a pipe in the ground and oil flows out, light crude at that. The budget reports from U.S. oil giants were astonishingly consistent. All said it would take over $100 billion. All said the payback period would be around 10 years. That tells you something. It really does take that long. So many oil companies cannot all be wrong. Ironically, Trump seemed to genuinely believe, before arresting Maduro, that with just tens of billions of dollars, Venezuela's production could be boosted to several million barrels per day, and that all of it would belong to the US. That is absurd. Could the margin of error in Trump's war decision-making really be this enormous? Tens of billions versus $100 billion, that's an order of magnitude difference. Before deciding to go to war, did Trump's team really not ask U.S. oil giants for a single budget estimation costs and payback periods? They arrested the president of a country, an act of war, and only afterward told oil companies to run the numbers. Arresting a head of state is an act of war. It is a complete and total violation of the United Nations Charter, and the basis for all of it was apparently some mysterious calculation that said tens of billions. A few days later, they realized the math was wrong. Then, after paying a massive reputational cost, they seized Venezuelan oil, thinking it was a huge prize, thinking Trump could calmly choose which oil companies would exploit it, enjoying their flattery and offerings along the way. But the result? The oil giants wouldn't even invest. 25 of them didn't even bother to show up. Why didn't previous US presidents attack Venezuela, a country right next door? Trump now knows why it's genuinely unprofitable to attack a poor country like this. But the war had already been launched, the reputational damage had already been done. From the news that followed, it's clear that Trump truly did go after Venezuela for oil. He genuinely believed that once it was taken, investing a few tens of billions would allow the money to start pouring in. Before launching the war, he didn't hold a single formal meeting with U.S. oil giants. He didn't even ask for a preliminary cost estimate. He relied solely on his small team's rough calculations and went straight to war. The world may indeed be run by improvised crews, but this time, it was improvised to an absurd degree